After a black woman CEO experienced denial of service at her bank, she maintained composure. Within 5 minutes, the manager responsible for the incident was terminated. The errand was intended to be brief, approximately 10 to 15 minutes, a task easily managed between scheduled meetings. That morning, Nadira Langston, aged 48, the head of a multi-million-dollar tech firm located in Phoenix, Arizona, exited her driver's black Lincoln and entered Sycamore First Bank, carrying her company's banking portfolio carefully. She was unhurried. There was no need for haste. Her schedule had been completely free to allow her to complete the transfer of a substantial business account, which was one of several her company had been relocating for months. The account manager she typically collaborated with had retired, and today she was meeting the new team in person to finalize the documents. A simple, standard procedure. Her navy blue suit was expertly tailored. Her hair was styled in a neat, low bun, and she wore diamond studs in her ears. Understated, yet refined. Her heels made no clicking sound as she moved. They barely rustled. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who had held a position of authority for a significant period and no longer felt the need to demonstrate it. Approaching the reception desk, she provided her name, Nadira Langston. She explained she was there to meet with someone from the commercial accounts department. The young woman at the counter glanced up, briefly nodding while entering information into the system. Okay, just a moment. It was then that things began. A woman, appearing to be in her mid-50s, with pale blonde hair and a rigid posture, emerged from a nearby glass office and walked over, offering a smile that seemed strained. "Can I help you with something?" she inquired. Her voice was concise. Nadira turned and offered her hand. "Yes, thank you. I'm Nadira Langston. I understand I'm scheduled to meet with someone from the business team. I'm completing a transfer." The woman didn't return the handshake. She looked at the folder Nadira held. "And you are representing which company?" "I'm the CEO of Bluestone Dynamics." The account was previously managed by Peter Larson before his retirement. The manager raised an eyebrow, her skepticism evident. "And you're here, unaccompanied?" "Yes," Nadira responded calmly. "It's a private matter." A pause followed, one of those pauses that conveys more than a complete sentence, the kind where judgment is disguised as confusion. "Right?" the woman said, adjusting her position. "We generally don't permit walk-ins for high-tier accounts unless it has been arranged beforehand," Nadira stated, still calm. She retrieved the confirmation email. "Here's the appointment confirmation from your internal scheduler. Today, 9:30 a.m. The woman looked at the document, then back at Nadira. "Are you certain this wasn't intended for another employee at your organization?" Nadira blinked, deliberately and slowly. "I operate the company." A brief silence followed. "My name is Cheryl Bainbridge. I'm the branch manager. We're dealing with some concerning events lately. Individuals have been falsely presenting their credentials to gain access to valuable accounts. You appreciate the seriousness of this, I'm sure." Nadira fully grasped the situation. "Cheryl, is it?" she replied, her tone remaining calm and measured. "Offering my license, corporate ID, and the transaction papers I'm here to approve?" Cheryl's smile became strained. "It's simply procedure, Ms. Langston. Please don't view it as directed at you." Nadira had encountered that phrase on countless occasions, in numerous boardrooms, airport lounges, and hotel lobbies. However, before she could add anything, Cheryl motioned to the receptionist. "Could you please contact security?" Just to err on the side of caution. It was necessary to confirm her statements. Nadira's mouth remained still. Her tone remained consistent. "Are you summoning security?" she asked. "On the CEO of one of our most important prospective clients?" Cheryl's shoulders became even more rigid. "I didn't suggest that," I replied. "I simply stated we needed to verify." At that moment, a subtle change occurred within the room. A quiet hum arose from a man seated in the waiting area. A brief look passed between two tellers positioned behind the counter. A palpable shift occurred. It was evident Nadira had followed every procedure correctly, yet she was still being made to feel like an outsider. Nadira, however, was not prepared to accept the situation. Not this time. The bank lobby wasn't crowded. but sufficient people were present to observe the unfolding events. An older man, waiting in line, moved uncomfortably. A woman seated close to the loan office took out her phone, feigning a check of her email, but her gaze remained fixed on Nadira and Cheryl. The security guard was not yet present, but Cheryl remained steadfast, as if anticipating immediate reinforcement. Nadira carefully opened her folder. It contained all necessary documentation to confirm her identity: business cards, certified articles of incorporation, 2 forms of identification, and the bank's own records confirming the account transfer. She arranged them on the reception desk methodically, similar to a card dealer. Composed. Accurate. Here, she stated, that is my Arizona state ID. This document confirms my company's EIN. It includes the board resolution authorizing me as the account signer. In this, she indicated the final sheet, is your bank's welcome letter. Cheryl briefly reviewed the papers. Anyone can print documents, she stated, crossing her arms. I've worked in banking for 27 years. I've seen people pretend to be CFOs, consultants, even heirs to estates. We don't make exceptions just because someone claims they're important. Nadira's tone remained steady, but her eyes narrowed. So this isn't about the paperwork? It's about how I appear, correct? Cheryl let out a dismissive sound. I beg your pardon. You heard me. If I presented myself as a 55-year-old man in a Brooks Brothers suit, you'd be extending a handshake and offering coffee. Ma'am, please reduce your voice volume. Nadira responded. My voice is already subdued, her words sharp and clear. I am the CEO. You have reviewed the documents. You know my name. The only thing that seemed to register was that I wasn't what they anticipated. A silence followed. A protracted, uncomfortable silence, and then Cheryl spoke. It wasn't a shout, but it carried. You just don't look like a CEO? The statement lingered, heavy as smoke after a match. Someone inhaled sharply. Another person murmured, did she really just say that? The receptionist stood motionless behind the desk. She appeared to wish she could simply vanish. Nadira's eyelids lowered deliberately, yet her voice remained steady. I have secured more than $80 million in venture capital. I have spearheaded 3 product launches. I have presented as a keynote speaker at CES and finalized agreements in 6 countries. I don't need to appear any particular way to be completely myself. Cheryl began to respond. However, before she could, Nadira shifted slightly and asked the receptionist, is there a regional director assigned to this branch? The young woman nodded hesitantly. He is present today, in fact. It's a surprise audit. He's in the back conference room. Nadira's lips formed a slight smile. Excellent. I wish to speak with him. Then, Cheryl intervened once more, visibly agitated. There's no necessity for that. I am capable of managing this. Let's avoid making the situation worse. Nadira faced her directly. You have already worsened this. You summoned security. You rejected every form of identification I presented. You challenged my position, my firm, and my credibility, all without initiating a single phone call to confirm any detail. Therefore, no, you're not capable of handling this. The room fell silent. The receptionist lifted the phone and initiated a call to an internal extension. Mr. Dorsey? She inquired. There is someone present requesting to speak with you. Her name is Nadira Langston from Bluestone Dynamics. A brief hesitation. Yes. All right. I will inform him. She ended the call and turned to Nadira, her eyes displaying surprise. He is on his way out now. Meanwhile, Cheryl remained unaware of the significant misjudgment she had made. The door situated at the rear of the bank swung open, and a tall man, dressed in a charcoal suit, emerged. He moved with a brisk, purposeful stride, alert but not hurried. He held a slim leather tablet and wore an expression suggesting displeasure at being interrupted from meetings. However, his expression softened immediately when he saw Nadira. Nadira Langston, he said, extending his hand. She shook it firmly. Yes, you must be Mr. Dorsey. He continued, Matthew Dorsey, Regional Director. I've heard a lot about you. Peter spoke very highly before he retired. We appreciate the opportunity to manage your accounts. Cheryl's mouth parted slightly, and her face paled. Matthew turned to her, appearing puzzled. Did something go wrong with the meeting? Cheryl struggled to find the right words. Yes, there was. I simply verified the credentials before providing access to the commercial suite. This follows our standard procedure. Nadira remained silent. She didn't need to. The receptionist, still positioned behind the counter, added cautiously. She contacted security, sir. She stated that we were unable to verify the client's identity. Matthew blinked. You contacted security? Regarding Ms. Langston? I was attempting to adhere to established procedures. Cheryl responded promptly. We've experienced individuals recently presenting fabricated business credentials. I prefer not to assume any risks. You understand how crucial our commercial accounts are. He gave her a direct look. Yes, I am aware. This is why we verify credentials, rather than form assessments of clients based on subjective impressions. Cheryl's shoulders tightened. Excuse me? She began. I've reviewed the compliance logs. You didn't even access the file she presented. You disregarded the scheduled appointment. You dismissed the identification. I was safeguarding the bank, she asserted. You embarrassed the bank, Matthew retorted. You've publicly humiliated one of the most significant clients we've on board this year. In view of customers, in view of staff, with no justification. A security guard finally arrived at the front entrance, his radio clipped to his belt, meticulously scanning the room, as if anticipating trouble. Matthew dismissed him with a wave. Everything's fine here, Eric, Cheryl repeated, her voice now trembling. False alarm. She had entered alone. Her name wasn't on the standard schedule. It was on the revised internal schedule, the one your assistant oversees. The same schedule you approve every Monday morning. You simply didn't review it, Nadira stated, stepping forward slightly, her voice low but clear. You hadn't acted without delay because of an absence. You paused because I didn't align with your preconceived notion of who should possess such authority. Matthew remained silent, allowing the quiet to linger. There was nothing further to elaborate on. Cheryl's mouth opened once more, but she spoke no words. Ms. Langston, Matthew stated, pivoting with a return to decorum. Would you be willing to accompany me? I will personally oversee your transaction from my office. Nadira acknowledged with a single nod. Certainly. They started to leave, passing the lines of desks and glass-walled offices. Cheryl stayed still by the front desk, her eyes wide, her face unreadable. No one moved towards her. The receptionist looked at her keyboard. The security guard walked away slowly, seeming unsure of what to do. Just as they were about to vanish down the hallway, Matthew halted and turned. Cheryl looked up, clearly surprised. My office. After this meeting, we'll be discussing your role here in detail. He didn't raise his voice. Wasn't necessary. However, Cheryl already sensed a change in the atmosphere. Matthew's office presented a crisp, though understated, impression. It featured clean lines, 2 chairs positioned across from his desk, and a tall window allowing morning light to spread across the carpet. Nadira waited until he invited her to sit, and even then, she maintained a straight posture and a composed demeanor. He closed the door softly, then turned back to face her. Ms. Langston, I want to apologize for what just happened. That should not have occurred. Not here. Not anywhere. You were treated unfairly, Nadira stated calmly, placing her folder on the desk. However, this isn't the first time. It probably won't be the last, Matthew responded, leaning against the edge of his desk. We have protocol for a reason, to prevent exactly this kind of thing from happening. Cheryl disregarded every step. She didn't just disregard protocol, Nadira said. She formed an opinion of me immediately upon seeing my face. Matthew breathed out his nose, crossing his arms. I acknowledged that. He resumed looking at the documents she had placed before him, reviewing them without speaking. He wasn't hurried. He was carefully considering everything. Everything is in the correct order, he stated. I never questioned it. However, I do want to inquire. Did she allow you any opportunity to provide an explanation before summoning security? Not really, Nadira responded. She recognized my name, saw my face, and heard my title, yet still inquired if the appointment belonged to another person. Matthew rubbed his jaw. That will present a challenge for her. A significant one. Nadira inclined her head. I didn't intend for anyone to lose their job. I am aware of that. However, Sometimes repercussions are deserved. Immediately, his office phone vibrated. He answered, listened briefly, then instructed, send her in. A knock followed shortly, and Cheryl entered. The usual assuredness had vanished. Her face was pale, her shoulders slightly hunched. She walked as if unsure how to position her hands or where to look. Ms. Langston, she began, her voice quiet. I owe you an apology. I was mistaken. That wasn't my goal. You don't have to pretend, Nadira stated, interrupting. Her voice wasn't harsh, only resolute. You acted precisely as you did. You didn't believe I was who I claimed to be. And instead of verifying, you chose to embarrass me. Cheryl looked to Matthew, visibly wanting him to intervene. He remained silent. I've spent over 2 decades in this field, she continued. I've witnessed fraud, identity theft, all sorts of deception. And none of that pertains to me, Nadira stated. You didn't err due to caution. You err because you believed you could evade detection, Matthew finally said. Cheryl, following a review of events this morning, encompassing internal audit records and client appointment logs, I have decided to end your employment, effective immediately. Cheryl blinked. And? Are you serious? Yes, I am, Matthew replied. You breached client protocol, showed disrespect to one of our most valuable account holders, and created a public disturbance that jeopardized the bank's reputation. This wasn't an isolated mistake. It was a pattern, and it concludes here. She appeared ready to retaliate, but the atmosphere offered no space for her to exert herself. She faced Nadira. I didn't intend to cause you any personal offense, she said. You didn't offend me, Nadira replied softly. You showed disrespect. There's a distinction. Cheryl lowered her gaze, then pivoted, exited the doorway, and left it slightly open. Matthew remained still for a moment. Subsequently, he settled into his desk chair and raised his head. I trust that achieves a degree of responsibility. This is a beginning, Nadira responded. However, beyond the confines of that office, the narrative was quickly moving away from the bank. Information doesn't spread rapidly within a bank, except when a significant event occurs. And what unfolded that morning at Sycamore was not merely significant, it was irrefutable. As Nadira and Matthew left the office, the ambience in the lobby had fundamentally changed. Patrons remained silent. Tellers murmured behind their workstations. Cheryl's absence was more pronounced than her presence had ever been. The nameplate had already been taken from the front glass office, as if she had never worked there. Matthew walked Nadira out personally. I'll ensure the rest of the paperwork is managed by someone capable, he said. You shouldn't have to experience this level of absurdity. Ever. Nadira nodded. Accepting the folder, he returned to her. The paperwork is the straightforward part, she replied. He gave a quiet, respectful laugh. Indeed, they arrived at the front doors, where 2 customers graciously held them open. A teller rose from behind the counter and offered a small wave, hesitant yet genuine. The sun was ascending higher above Phoenix. The air was dry, and the pavement was warm. Nadira hesitated close to the curb, her driver advancing, the car door already ajar. She glanced back at Matthew. A statement you made in your office resonated with me, that occasionally consequences are deserved. He affirmed this with a nod. Yes, I agree, she stated. But repercussions lacking comprehension do little to affect change. Matthew lifted his eyebrows, showing interest. I don't want Cheryl to experience hardship, Nadira proceeded. I need people to understand this wasn't about me. This occurs for Black professionals, particularly women, on a daily basis. It happens at airports, restaurants, stores, and meetings. And frequently, no one faces termination. They're simply disregarded. Again and again, he remained silent. He allowed her to continue. Perhaps for the first time, someone like him genuinely listened. If the bank is to address this with seriousness, she stated, refrain from simply publishing a statement online. Avoid issuing a standard apology. Initiate a dialogue. Instruct your managers regarding the oversights made. Prevent this from recurring for the next woman who enters that establishment. Matthew inhaled deeply, his posture now slightly more burdened. You are correct. I am unable to reverse the events that transpired. However, I can ensure they contribute to a positive outcome. That's the true measure, isn't it? Nadira responded. Not what one accomplishes with an audience, but what one alters when unobserved. She entered the vehicle, and the door closed behind her. The interior was quiet, but the silence felt clean. Her driver glanced back through the mirror. Everything satisfactory, Ms. Langston? She looked at her hands, then out the window at the glass facade of the bank. Cheryl had resolved to ignore her. The crucial decision, the one that would have significant impact, had already been made by someone else. Yes, it has, she said softly. Nadira didn't know that within 24 hours the entire country would be discussing what transpired inside that branch. It began with a tweet, just a few lines from someone who had been sitting near the loan officer's desk that morning. Just witnessed a black woman CEO get denied service at her own bank. She remained composed, publicly addressed the bias, and the manager was terminated immediately. I don't know her name, but I won't forget her demeanor. By lunchtime, the tweet had surpassed 40,000 likes. By evening, it appeared on Instagram, then Facebook, and subsequently on local news. A local blogger identified Nadira's name by comparing information with a press release Bluestone Dynamics released earlier that month. A Phoenix reporter verified the information with the bank. By nightfall, Nadira Langston was trending across the nation. She made no public statements. It wasn't necessary. Others shared their experiences. LinkedIn was filled with accolades. Corporate professionals, frequently black women, recounted similar situations, being questioned at the valet of their own office buildings, asked to show ID 3 times before boarding first-class flights, being addressed as sweetie, even while leading negotiations worth millions. People described Nadira as graceful, resilient, and composed. However, those who understood the situation better explained that it was more than grace. It was a matter of survival. Simultaneously, Sycamore First corporate headquarters mobilized. Within 24 hours, they issued a statement recognizing the incident, confirming Cheryl Bainbridge's departure from employment, and affirming the company's dedication to equity and continued training. This response proved insufficient for the public. Numerous comments appeared, questioning how many other Cheryls remain working in your branches. And do your executives grasp that implicit bias training cannot address issues permitted by your hiring processes? Black women should not be expected to remain composed when facing disrespect. Nadira made no public statements regarding the situation until 3 days later when she consented to an interview on a podcast hosted by a longtime friend and business strategist, Leona Bates. They faced each other in a silent studio in Tempe, with microphones activated and without any prepared notes. Leona began softly, asking, "You've remained silent while the internet has erupted. What prompted this response now?" Nadira answered, "Because the matter is no longer about me." Leona focused on what this situation highlighted. Specifically, that despite possessing the correct titles, documents, and credentials, people still perceive you as an outsider. Speaking out is then labeled as causing a disturbance, while remaining quiet is interpreted as agreement. It's a draining predicament, regardless of the choice. They discussed the matter for almost an hour, extending beyond the bank to address the significant emotional burden of maneuvering within established hierarchies while burdened by long-standing prejudices. Nadira remained composed. She didn't express sadness or frustration. Instead, she simply stated the facts, clearly, steadily, and without question. Following the broadcast, a fresh surge of interest emerged. This interest was authentic, thoughtful, and not superficial. Fellow CEOs contacted her. Business publications featured the narrative. A headline declared, "She didn't raise her voice. She raised the bar." Nevertheless, Nadira maintained a grounded perspective. She did not desire recognition. She sought transformation, and she understood that meaningful change rarely appears in news headlines. The bias appeared in hiring practices, policy decisions, and even in determining who was initially believed. Even after the initial news coverage faded and the events became part of collective memory, those who witnessed her that morning at the bank still remembered what they saw. A few weeks later, Nadira addressed a room full of college students at Arizona State University. She had not intended to give any public speeches that season, as her schedule was already very full. When a business ethics professor contacted her and requested a conversation with her class, she readily agreed. The event was understated. There were no stage lights or press coverage, just 40 students, some taking notes in notebooks, others using laptops, eager to hear from the woman whose experience transformed a regular bank visit into a nationwide conversation. She presented no slides. There was no podium. She simply walked to the room's front, paused, and began speaking. "I won't be telling a storybook narrative," she stated. "I won't be suggesting that if you labor diligently, no one will challenge you, because that isn't invariably accurate." The room fell silent, all attentive. You can possess the title, the suit, the contracts, the track record, and still be informed that you don't belong, not due to any failings on your part, but because someone else cannot envision your triumph without a face resembling their own. She surveyed the room. Her voice remained gentle, but each word resonated. And in those moments, a choice presents itself. Do you contract to ease their discomfort, or do you maintain your full presence, even if it creates tension in the space? A young man seated in the front row raised his hand. He asked, "How did you manage to remain composed during that experience? Weren't you feeling anger?" Nadira responded with a slow nod. "Naturally, I was. But anger is only valuable if you understand how to channel it. That day, I employed it to remain grounded. I employed that tactic to ensure she couldn't dismiss me without looking me in the eye while doing it." Another hand then rose, this time from a young woman. "What advice would you offer someone just beginning, who hasn't developed a resume like yours?" Nadira hesitated. "Recognize your value before anyone else attempts to define it for you. And if they try to diminish you, speak regardless, even if your voice trembles." There is a certain quality to her delivery, as if she were addressing herself as much as the listener. Following the presentation, students formed a line to express their gratitude. Some simply desired to shake her hand. Others sought guidance. One young woman, speaking softly, shared, "I'm studying engineering. I'm considering dropping out. I didn't believe there was a place for someone with my background." Nadira responded, making direct eye contact, "There is. And if there isn't, create it." That evening, back in her office, Nadira found herself alone at her desk, enjoying a cup of tea. Her inbox remained full. Her phone continued to buzz. The excitement hadn't fully subsided. She understood that the public's attention would fade. However, certain individuals would retain the memory. The students, the customers present in that bank lobby, the employees who witnessed a manager lose her position due to someone's unwillingness to yield. And perhaps, in the future, when a woman like her entered a place where she wasn't anticipated, she might be greeted instead of questioned. She might be respected, all because of one moment, one voice, one refusal to remain silent. If this story resonated with you, even slightly, please share it. Change doesn't always begin with prominent demonstrations or widespread media attention. Occasionally, it originates with a composed, persistent voice that states, "This isn't right." A man struck a 53-year-old woman on public transit, mistakenly believing she was alone and vulnerable. He was unaware that her husband held the position of the most respected officer in town. It had been a challenging day, characterized by delays and setbacks. When Vanessa Kirkland arrived at the Blue Line platform in downtown Sacramento, her heels were causing discomfort, her back ached, and she was 2 missed calls behind schedule on her way to the train. The time was approaching 6:15 p.m. The sun had already begun to descend behind the old courthouse building. She looked at her phone, but did not check the notifications. Not tonight. Vanessa was 53, possessing a sharp mind, a warm voice, and consistently wearing her silver-framed glasses and demonstrating patience. She worked as a lead advocate at a nonprofit legal center, experiencing long days, emotionally draining environments, and paperwork that was constant. Nevertheless, she wouldn't trade it. Assisting individuals, particularly families navigating a system they found perplexing or untrustworthy, felt like a duty, not merely a profession. As the train arrived, She boarded and looked for a place to sit. Limited space was available. She located a partially filled row towards the center and settled in with a soft exhale, placing her tote bag next to her. The atmosphere was largely peaceful. Passengers were absorbed in their phones, listening to music or browsing on screens. A teenager in a school hoodie, chewing gum and watching something with the volume a little too high, sat directly across from her. 2 seats to her left, a couple of nurses still in scrubs spoke softly in Spanish. It was nothing out of the ordinary. The train began to move. Vanessa rested her head and breathed out. She considered dinner, likely just leftovers. Perhaps she would reheat that lentil stew, or possibly just cereal and a long bath. Her thoughts wandered. But then a voice arose. It was loud, rapid, and smug. "Excuse me, I'm going to ask you something." She didn't move at first, just opened her eyes slowly. Across the aisle, a man had gotten on at the last stop. Mid-20s, tall, wiry, and loud, wore a sleeveless hoodie and had headphones around his neck. He was looking straight at her, grinning. Vanessa blinked once, didn't say a word. He leaned a little closer. "I'm serious. You're sitting up here as if you're running for mayor, wearing a complete church ensemble." I observed her. A nearby teenager chuckled softly. The man visibly straightened, seeming to relish the attention. "You must be going somewhere important, ma'am," he stated. She remained silent. Adjusting her glasses, she maintained a dignified posture and subtly turned her head toward the window. However, he wasn't finished. He began pacing with deliberate, measured steps down the aisle, gesturing at various passengers. "People like her," he declared, "always act as if they are superior. Sit straight, avert your gaze, and remain silent." It seemed as though others judged us harshly. People began to notice. A woman near the front briefly looked back before quickly averting her gaze. A young man behind Vanessa subtly reached for his phone. Vanessa felt no surge of panic. Years of practice had taught her to remain composed during confrontations. She recognized this behavior, a display of confidence fueled by the desire for attention. A man who felt more powerful when others appeared diminished. She spoke calmly. "You should take a seat." Her voice was even, neither raised nor trembling, simply resolute. The man paused. He paused, appearing hesitant. Then, he tilted his head. "Oh, are you giving orders now? Do you have a badge or something?" Vanessa remained unmoved. "No, but you're embarrassing yourself in front of a train full of strangers." His smile briefly wavered. Then he moved closer, too close. However, the atmosphere in the car shifted. People were observing now, more than previously. There was tension, certainly, but also a sense of anticipation, as if everyone was awaiting the next development. Vanessa remained still, her gaze fixed on him, her hands resting in her lap. He smirked. "You got a mouth on you. Let's see if you talk like that when I'm a little closer." But he didn't know who he was addressing, and he was about to discover that the hard way. The train rattled forward, cutting through the city as if oblivious to the escalating tension inside Car 7. The man, later identified as Kyle Dunham, aged 26, with a record full of petty nonsense, stood inches from Vanessa now. A subtle aroma of malt liquor and mint gum emanated from his breath. He lowered himself, observing her with the gaze of a child studying a motionless doll, anticipating her to break eye contact first. She remained steadfast. "You one of those strong, independent types, huh?" He expectorated. "Always got something smart to say when there's people around to protect you. But you on your own now, sweetheart." Vanessa released a barely perceptible sigh, the kind intended to convey disappointment, not weariness. "I'm not on my own," she stated. Kyle surveyed the surroundings with a flourish. "Oh, who has your back, then?" he called out, raising his voice. "Does anyone among you want to come and save Grandma over here?" He paused. "No, I didn't expect so." The word grandma stung more than he anticipated, not because of her age, but because of the implication behind it. It suggested she was diminished, that women aged and became invisible, useless, laughable, something to ridicule, not to honor. Nevertheless, she remained composed. "You're embarrassing yourself," she stated gently. That's what bullies do when they are afraid. Kyle appeared startled, freezing in place. How do you know my name? He demanded. Vanessa subtly shifted forward, her voice remaining composed. You mentioned it earlier. On the phone, prior to boarding the train. That was a deception. He denied having done so, but her statement unnerved him, prompting him to question what else she might know. You're crazy, he mumbled. Vanessa turned back toward the window, not in a dismissive manner, but as if he were insignificant. This was the catalyst. Kyle's pride couldn't withstand the rejection. The audience had fallen silent. His performance was unsuccessful, and a bitter expression tightened his features. Finish speaking now? He demanded. All that talking, and now you're afraid? Vanessa remained silent, so he gently nudged her shoulder, a clear indication that this was no longer a verbal exchange. A sharp intake of breath came from the rear of the vehicle immediately. Vanessa raised her gaze slowly, maintaining her composure and silence. Kyle, she stated, this is your final opportunity to take a seat and depart with some measure of self-respect. Kyle's thoughts had vanished. He was consumed by anger. Humiliated, vulnerable, and needing to regain command, he struck her. The sound was distinct, a smack of skin against skin. Her glasses moved slightly. Her head tilted a little due to the impact. Exclamations arose, escalating into a commotion. People stood up. Phones appeared. A voice called out from the rear. Vanessa simply blinked, then remained still. She carefully straightened her glasses, neatly arranged a strand of hair behind her ear, then fixed her gaze directly upon him. You have just committed a significant error. Kyle hesitated briefly, his hands still raised, his breathing now shallow. Who do you think you are? He asked, his voice softer. She inclined her head. You'll find out soon enough. Two rose back. The young man who had been quietly recording rose and walked to the rear of the car. He had observed something in her eyes, something unyielding, not fearful. It prompted his movement. A voice murmured, She's important. I believe she's someone. Another voice followed. Is that the chief's wife? That's the police chief's wife. And now Kyle was hearing the murmur. What? He said. No one answered, but the mood in the car shifted. It had gone from outrage to recognition. This wasn't just a woman on a train anymore. This was somebody. Vanessa stayed still. Her cheek stung. Her hand trembled just a little in her lap. But she didn't let it show. Instead, she reached for her phone, opened a text, typed 5 words, call me when you can. Sent. She glanced upward, not toward Kyle, but at the doors. The train was one stop from Curtis Park Station, and that was the extent of his remaining time. Curtis Park Station was less than 2 minutes away now. But for all those inside the train car, time began to lengthen. No one was speaking anymore. Not genuinely. There were hushed tones, murmurs, yes. But the atmosphere had changed, becoming concentrated and oppressive. Kyle sensed it. He disliked it. He positioned himself in the middle of the aisle, as if he had something yet to demonstrate. His gaze now moved frequently, scanning the passengers who avoided eye contact. He observed those recording, resenting their lack of laughter. They weren't fearful of him, either. Not anymore. Man, you're tripping, he mumbled. She started it, trying to appear superior. No one reacted. Across from him, Vanessa had repositioned her tote onto her lap. Her fingers were clenched around the straps, her thumb rhythmically stroking a small stitched detail. She felt no fear. However, anger simmered within her. A quiet anger, an anger that held back, an anger that was justified. Her skin still felt hot. The mark of his hand remained visible. She refrained from touching it. Maintaining a composed stance, she kept her shoulders straight. She was aware of the scrutiny, not only from those with phones, but also from the observant individuals who had witnessed similar incidents and felt powerless. Now, their attention was on her, and so was Kyle's. You think you're better than me, he hissed suddenly. That's what this is. You people always act like you're too good. Vanessa finally looked at him. Her voice was low. I don't think I'm better than you. I think you're making choices you're going to regret. You threatening me? He shot back. No, she said. I'm warning you. There's a difference. The train gave a mechanical groan as it began slowing into Curtis Park. The lights flickered once overhead. Kyle turned toward the door, fidgeting. A woman 2 seats down whispered something to her boyfriend. He nodded subtly, moved his hand into his jacket pocket, a badge, an off-duty officer merely awaiting the signal. And then Kyle turned back one last time. "You ain't nothing but a loudmouth in a skirt," he spat. "Nobody gonna save you." And with that, he reared his hand back again. But this time someone moved. Not Vanessa, not the off-duty cop. A man, tall, with a beard and still wearing a dusty construction vest from work, moved quickly from the rear of the car. He seized Kyle's wrist as he started to swing and pulled it down forcefully. "Try that again, and I'll break your arm," the man stated, his voice calm but menacing. Kyle attempted to free himself, but was unable to. The man's grip was stronger and more resolute. "Finished?" he inquired. Kyle swore, recoiled, and stumbled toward the opposite wall of the train. He appeared like a trapped creature, snarling more from panic than from any sense of dignity. Vanessa rose. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't theatrical. Just even. She surveyed the car, noting the woman with her phone, the young man in the hoodie, the child in the back feigning disinterest. Then she looked at Kyle. "I won't file charges for what you just did," she stated, her voice clear enough for everyone to hear. "But someone will. Someone invariably does. And when they do, I hope it's recorded." The train emitted a hiss as the doors opened. Curtis Park Station. Light flooded in from the platform. There, on the platform, accompanied by 2 plainclothes officers, stood Darius Kirkland. He wasn't wearing a uniform. It wasn't necessary. He wore a black button-down shirt and slacks, and his expression was stern and intense. He boarded the train. Silence filled the space. Kyle stared at him, puzzled. "Who?" Darius spoke, his tone direct. Kyle remained still. Darius advanced 1 step. Now, a badge appeared, revealed with quiet assurance. The name was visible. Kirkland. Kyle's gaze shifted to Vanessa. An understanding dawned. That name, her. Oh no, he breathed. The off-duty officer behind him placed a hand on his shoulder. "Let's go." "I didn't know." Kyle shouted. "Yo, I didn't know who she was." Darius said nothing. Vanessa stepped off the train first. She didn't look back. But the man who slapped her would never forget the moment he realized who she was, nor how close he came to losing a lot more than his pride. They walked Kyle off the platform like a child being removed from class for misbehaving. This wasn't a school setting, and no message would be sent home. The train departed behind them. Vanessa maintained a steady, even pace as she walked. Darius walked beside her, mostly silent. He didn't need to speak. His jaw was tense, not with anger, but with controlled composure. Years of policing had shown him the value of knowing when to speak and when silence was more impactful. Behind them, Kyle was guided to a bench close to the platform stairs. He was breathing rapidly, his eyes wide, still processing what had occurred. A plainclothes officer stood close by, observing with little visible emotion. Vanessa reduced her speed and then spoke softly, her voice almost a whisper. "I'm okay." Darius looked at her, his eyes showing a trace of gentleness for the first time since boarding the train. "I know you are," he replied, "but I'm not." He hesitated. "I saw the entire video before I arrived. The initial message I received was from Naomi Simmons. Do you recall her? From Housing Court?" Vanessa gave a single nod. She witnessed the event as it unfolded, communicating it to me in just 4 words. "Is this your wife?" Vanessa released a sigh that mingled amusement and weary comfort. "You should have observed the child in the 3rd row," she remarked. He attempted to disappear the instant that boy began to be noisy, resembling Darren when he would feign sleep to evade tasks. Darius laughed softly. "I long for that boy," she acknowledged, her eyes wandering across the platform. Many people on that train likely recognized this scenario. However, this time the events unfolded differently. He touched her shoulder gently. "It's because you didn't react," she said. "That alters everything." A few yards behind them, Kyle began to fall apart. Not from guilt, not yet, but from fear. The fog lifted, and the man he slapped was standing nearby, shaking hands with law enforcement, while his own hands were held beneath his thighs like a child avoiding reprimand. An officer spoke to him, and his reply was abrupt and overly loud. Darius overheard. I didn't even hit her that hard. He glanced at Vanessa, his expression remaining composed. Do you mind if I handle this? She gave an affirmative nod. I trust you. Darius then proceeded back toward Kyle, his steps deliberate and controlled, as if approaching a speaker's platform rather than a bench. Kyle sat up straighter as he noticed Darius's approach. Yo, look, I didn't know who she was, man. I didn't know she was, like, married to a cop. I believe she was simply just what? Darius interrupted. Tell me. Kyle's mouth opened, but he didn't speak. Darius sat beside him, maintaining a comfortable distance. You thought she was merely a woman. Alone. An easy target. Kyle's lips tightened, seeking an explanation. She was speaking her mind. No, Darius responded, his voice calm. She was demonstrating composure. That's not a common sight, is it? I didn't harm her in that way, though. You made contact with her. You placed your hands on her. Before an audience. Recorded on camera. And then there was another attempt. Kyle scanned the area, as if searching for support. But the platform was empty. There was no one to assist him. No one ever did for people like Vanessa. That was intentional, Darius stated. You're fortunate because she's extending understanding that others wouldn't. But don't misinterpret that as a sign of vulnerability. Kyle lowered his gaze. His earlier arrogance diminished to a smaller form. The inflated self-assurance had vanished. He appeared more like a boy now, lost, tired, and suddenly very aware of how much worse things could have been. What's going to happen to me? He asked. That depends, Darius said. Right now, you're being detained. There's an outstanding warrant on you for a missed court date from 3 months ago. Kyle's mouth dropped open. Unrelated, but not forgotten. Darius stood up. And later? That depends on what kind of man you decide to be when you walk out of holding. He turned, not waiting for a reply, and returned to Vanessa, who was now seated close to a column, eyes closed in a brief moment of quiet. However, the complete story wasn't finished, and its full impact hadn't completely arrived. At least, not yet. They didn't depart the station immediately. Vanessa had taken a place on the lengthy metal bench beside the wall, sheltered by the weathered Curtis Park sign. She sat straight, legs crossed at the ankle, and her hand were finally relaxed. A stillness had returned, the type often present after a disturbance. Darius stood a short distance away, holding a phone to his ear and speaking softly. Vanessa couldn't discern his words, but she understood his demeanor. It was the voice he employed when rectifying another's blunder. Following a few minutes, he ended the call, approached her, and sat next to her. They're taking him to county, he stated. He isn't facing charges yet for the slap. Not unless you request it. Vanessa remained silent for a moment. She wasn't trying to be elusive. She simply needed a short time to consider what was most important. I won't push, she stated following a brief silence. Let the warrant take care of it. That's sufficient for now, Darius agreed slowly, nervously biting his lower lip. He acknowledged her fortunate position. They remained seated next to each other. People passed them on the platform, some offering curious looks, some murmuring as they recognized her from the videos already in circulation. Vanessa had experienced widespread online attention previously. However, nothing like this. Typically, the shared content consisted of excerpts from her addresses at city forums or housing events. Previously, a video of her embracing a woman who had recently won a child custody case had garnered thousands of likes. However, this situation was different. Now, she was the woman on the train, and her face, still faintly marked where Kyle's hand had landed, was circulating across timelines and news feeds in real time. She anticipated the consequences, comment sections, opinions, outrage, and debate. Some might describe her as a hero. Others might perceive her as lenient for not responding in kind. Still others would likely seek to place blame. Darius broke the silence. Remember that speech I gave last week? He began. About dignity, public space, and consequence? She replied, yes, I was in the front row. He continued, I said every citizen deserves to move through their city without fear. That is the baseline, not the luxury. She nodded. He went on, when I said that, I was thinking about everyone. Children walking to school, grandparents catching the bus, teachers, nurses, grocery clerks. I hadn't been thinking about you, she acknowledged. I know, she said gently, and I regret that I hadn't. Vanessa turned to him. Please don't do that. He lowered his gaze. You shouldn't have been in that situation. She offered a brief laugh. Do you believe I haven't faced worse? His eyes rose. I've lived 53 years in this skin, Darius. On this earth, in this body. I've been followed, yelled at, disrespected, dismissed, and talked over. It simply so happened they were recorded. He showed no smile. Yet, he seemed to grasp the sentiment. You've always been stronger than I remarked. No, she replied. I'm simply more experienced. A train whistle echoed as a train arrived at the station. A different vehicle, different travelers, the same city. A young woman in scrubs drew near carefully, her gaze shifting between them. Excuse me, Mrs. Kirkland? She inquired. Vanessa turned. Yes, I just wanted to express my gratitude, she said, for the way you manage him, for maintaining your dignity. Vanessa rose, offered her hand. What's your name? Rosa replied. I'm a nurse at St. Joseph's. You had a long shift? Vanessa nodded. You take care of people all day. Thank you. Rosa appeared taken aback by the courtesy. She offered a small nod and departed. Darius rose to stand next to his wife. Let's go home. But Vanessa didn't move immediately. She glanced around the platform one last time, observing the train tracks, the benches, the signage, and the flow of people as if nothing had occurred. It felt as if time had restarted. I'll ride the train tomorrow, she stated. Are you certain? Yes. And the following day. And the day after that. I refuse to be silenced simply because someone is unfamiliar with me, Darius said, placing a gentle hand on her back. However, as they departed the station, neither of them realized the extent to which this moment would affect those beyond the train car. This became clear when the news broke. By the time they arrived at their home in Southland Park, Vanessa's phone had received more than 20 notifications. Darius had received a significant influx of communication. Friends, journalists, colleagues, and individuals they hadn't spoken to in years suddenly recalled their contact information. She chose not to respond to most of these inquiries. The incident had already been reported in the local news by 9 p.m. One news source titled their report Community Leader Assaulted on Light Rail. Suspect Apprehended at Station. Another opted for a more dramatic headline. Slap on the train sparks debate over civility and race. However, the video clips were the content that spread most rapidly. A 16-second vertical video, filmed by someone sitting 3 rows back, captured Kyle's words. This is our Lance. It showed the slap and the subsequent moment where she met his gaze, appearing unaffected by his action. Within hours, the video surpassed 100,000 views, then 200, and finally 500,000. Each comment offered an opinion. Some praised her composure. Others questioned why no one intervened earlier. And predictably, some found fault. Daria was sitting on the bed's edge, looking at news articles, her jaw tight. Vanessa entered from the bathroom, her face freshly washed and her hair wrapped. You should put that away, Vanessa said. Daria looked up. I keep reading these comments. People analyzing what you should have said. What you didn't say. It's as if you were putting on a show. That's the internet. Daria replied. I simply dislike seeing you transformed into a symbol. Vanessa lifted an eyebrow. That has been occurring since I was 13 years old. The first instance I experienced being followed in a drugstore simply for wearing lip gloss marked a turning point. Daria sighed. I know. I only wanted you to find some quiet. I have quiet, she replied. And I still do. That boy didn't deprive me of anything. In fact, he provided a space for me to express what I've always felt. He looked at her, pausing. That regardless of your identity, respect isn't gained through increased volume or physical force. It's demonstrated by how you regard those who are not indebted to you. She positioned herself beside him, carefully taking the phone from his grasp and placing it on the nightstand. You recall what you told the academy class last spring? She inquired. Which part? He responded. We don't train for revenge. We train for response. Darius chuckled softly. I borrowed that line from my grandfather. Well, you gave it meaning, she replied. It's the same reason I refrained from reacting with force today. You address situations as they arise, not according to others' expectations, but as they require. A pause. Did you see how many people were watching? She continued. If I had lost control, it wouldn't have been about him anymore. It would have become a completely different situation. Darius nodded slowly. You are correct. At that moment, a new message appeared on Vanessa's phone. This one was not from the press. It was from a mother of a high school student she'd represented 6 months earlier in a school discrimination case. She had defended him after he'd been suspended for what proved to be a false accusation by a teacher. The message stated, "My son saw the video and said, 'That's Miss Kirkland. She's real. I just want you to know how much you matter to people like us. Thank you for being who you are.'" Vanessa looked at the message for a long moment. Then she gave the phone to Darius silently. He read it, exhaled, and for the first time that night, he allowed himself to smile. "You matter," he said. "So do you," she replied. The following morning, while they were seated together on the porch enjoying coffee, a news van leisurely drove down the street. The vehicle didn't halt, but the camera within directed its view towards the house before proceeding onward. "I suspect today will be more eventful than anticipated," he remarked. "I believe every day is," Vanessa replied. She rose, stretched, and retrieved her tote bag near the door. "Are you going out?" he asked. "Yes. They require my presence at the center. We have eviction hearings scheduled for this week. I will not be absent due to someone being unable to accept a woman speaking directly." Darius also rose. "Desire a lift?" She offered a smile. "No, I will travel by train." She observed her intently for a moment. "Are you certain?" "I want to be visible. Identical seat, identical time. Because I'm not the one who requires anonymity." However, as Vanessa resumed her schedule, the events that transpired on that train continued to resonate far beyond the station, impacting dinner conversations, classrooms, news organizations, and homes throughout the nation. Following those initial moments, video recordings of Vanessa Kirkland were shared across newsrooms, courtrooms, break rooms, and barbershops. The incident generated discussion in locations that seldom addressed individuals like her, middle-aged, black, composed during pressure, unaffected by disorder. Podcasts featured it. Community forums offered perspectives. National broadcasters attempted to contextualize it, as though it conformed to a predetermined narrative concerning race, gender, and power. However, the situation defied easy categorization. That was its compelling quality. Despite everything, Vanessa consistently took the same train, often securing the same seat when available. Whenever someone recognized her, they would offer a nod or a quiet expression of gratitude. On one occasion, an elderly gentleman approached her to simply state, "I witnessed what occurred. I'm showing my granddaughter." I told her, this is how one maintains composure during a crisis. Vanessa, however, wasn't seeking acknowledgement. That's what made her actions so meaningful. She had navigated hardships previously. The difference was that the world hadn't been documenting it. The city organized a public forum 2 weeks later. Community safety, transportation, and law enforcement relations were the focus of the meeting. The hall was full. Darius was invited to speak. Attendees anticipated a discussion about crime statistics and updated patrol approaches. However, he chose to recount the story of the train. "I wasn't present at the beginning," he stated from the podium. "I wasn't seated beside her. I didn't observe the expression in his gaze or the stillness with which she remained while others spoke. But I was present when it concluded, and what I witnessed extended beyond my wife." He embodied restraint, strength, and a level of control that most of us only discuss in theory. He paused, looking out at the crowd. Her actions transcended mere self-preservation. She demonstrated that standing your ground doesn't always require physical force. Sometimes it involves maintaining composure when someone is attempting to undermine you. Vanessa remained silent that evening. She was seated in the second row, wearing a navy blazer and black slacks, her hands resting in her lap, observing, hearing, understanding. Afterward, as they headed back to the vehicle, a young reporter stepped forward. He appeared apprehensive, holding a microphone in one hand and a phone in the other. "Mrs. Kirkland," he began, "do you believe you represent something, given what transpired?" She regarded him. "I am not a symbol," she replied. "I am a woman. I was weary. I was on the train, returning home. and someone believed that entitled them to behave as though I lacked significance, but the manner in which it was addressed. Many are describing it as impactful. She remained composed. What's impactful, she stated, is learning how to maintain your composure in a world that persistently attempts to disrupt it. He began to pose another inquiry, but she raised her hand subtly. That is all, she responded. Have a good evening. She and Darius departed into the night, and the story, though no longer dominating news coverage, persisted. It resonated in discussions among friends, in classrooms, when instructors utilized it as a practical example. Reflecting on the events, many recalled the emotions they felt witnessing it, prompting introspection about their own responses, their own stillness, and their own sense of self-respect. Kyle Dunham appeared in court 3 days following his arrest. The court referenced his previous charges and imposed a 30-day detention while awaiting further investigation. Vanessa did not attend the court proceedings, stating that she had already expressed what she needed to. The legal center where she worked experienced an increase in support following the incident. Financial support arrived, and individuals registered to volunteer. A few referenced the video, but the majority expressed a desire to contribute to something impactful without needing fanfare. Vanessa Kirkland, in particular, continued her daily train journeys. That train, for better or worse, evolved into a visible representation of dignity and action. In a world often filled with distractions, individuals such as Vanessa Kirkland serve as a reminder of a truth that is often overlooked. True resilience isn't always loud. Occasionally, it remains still, speaks with composure, and stands firm. This isn't driven by a desire to triumph, but a determination to remain present. If this narrative resonated with you, prompted reflection, or evoked thoughts of someone familiar, please share it. Subscribe for further authentic stories similar to this one, highlighting how quiet strength can be more impactful than force and justice can manifest in unexpected ways. Remember, you never know who you might encounter on the train. Mr. Braddock, the calculus teacher at Eisenberg High in Elkhart, Indiana, made a light-hearted gesture, singling out the janitor for amusement in front of the class. However, when the man calmly approached the board and solved the problem with unexpected skill, the room fell silent, fundamentally altering the school's perception of him. This occurred during fourth period on a Thursday, a typical day at Eisenberg High where students often watch the clock more than the lesson. Mr. Braddock had a certain reputation. Known for his sharp wit, impatience, and sarcastic remarks, he was a figure who evoked tolerance rather than affection. The classroom felt stale. Equations covered the whiteboard. A subtle scent of eraser dust and old sneakers permeated the air. Phones lay hidden beneath desks. A few students feigned attention, while others gazed out the window. Then, an event occurred, altering the classroom's atmosphere dramatically. While Mr. Braddock wrote another derivative on the board, a quiet squeak drifted in from the hallway. The janitor was close by, mopping just outside the classroom with his characteristic slow, steady pace. Braddock stopped speaking, looked toward the door, and gave a slight smile. Suddenly, he turned to the class and indicated the hallway. "Look who's here," he said. "Tell me, do you think you can solve this one?" He struck the board with his marker, mimicking a game show challenge. A ripple of laughter followed, not loud, but the type that makes you subtly adjust your posture, unsure of its appropriateness. Mr. Braddock smiled knowingly. "Come on, Lamar." Lamar Dorsey, a 52-year-old janitor, stood in the hallway, holding his mop. The familiar blue uniform, clean but faded, was on him, displaying L. Dorsey embroidered above his chest pocket. He remained still, showing no reaction. His gaze swept across the room. Then, deliberately, he entered. A mop rested against the wall. Several students straightened. Some anticipated a clever remark or a sudden departure, perhaps a jest or simply a walkout. However, that didn't happen. Instead, Lamar proceeded to the front of the room. "You mind?" he inquired quietly, indicating the board with a gesture. Braddock raised his brows. "Be my guest." Several phones silently emerged from backpacks. One girl whispered, Is he serious? But nobody interrupted Lamar. He picked up the marker, examined the equation, and paused, not because he was unsure, but as if he were considering something. Intensely, like someone studying a well-known map. He narrowed his eyes slightly. Then he began to write. There was no theatrics, no embellishment, just careful strokes, one line following another. The room became unnervingly quiet. The only sounds were the marker on the whiteboard and a chair creaking as someone leaned forward. Mr. Braddock crossed his arms, observing intently. His expression remained unchanged, though his jaw tightened. Lamar explained the steps aloud, his voice quiet and patient. See, this here's a chain rule problem, but the trick is recognizing the inner function first. Once you isolate that, it becomes a lot cleaner. He moved with the ease of someone experienced, not just with the problem, but with the teaching. His manner was unassuming and not arrogant. He clarified matters straightforwardly, with clarity, as if he's dedicated more effort to instruction than to menial tasks. Upon completion, he secured the marker and retreated. The board displayed meticulous, well-structured work. He addressed Braddock, then the class. That's one approach, he stated. And briefly, stillness reigned. A junior student in the rear murmured. He understood it correctly. Mr. Braddock remained silent. Not instantly. His mouth parted a little, but no words emerged. The silence became more pronounced than any joke he could have delivered. Lamar nodded politely and retreated to the door. He gathered his mop. There was no applause, no self-promotion, only that quiet assurance, as if he hadn't just dramatically altered the room. But as Lamar reached for the chalk, no one anticipated what would follow. No one stirred. For a complete 10 seconds, it felt as though the class had been pulled from a dream and placed into something authentic. The sort of moment that doesn't typically occur in a high school classroom. Lamar Dorsey, known as Mr. Dorsey, was in the process of leaving when a comment was made. Had he just thought that? It was Wes Hanley, a senior seated in the front row, who rarely spoke unless it concerned academic performance. He was completely serious. His eyes were wide with surprise. He glanced back at the board, as if a solution might have altered during a brief moment of closure. Braddock then spoke, his tone even and somewhat annoyed. He acknowledged that Mr. Dorsey had, nonetheless, provided the correct answer. His voice lacked its typical sarcasm. A different feeling seemed present, perhaps confusion, or even something like discomfort. Lamar looked back. I worked with numbers extensively in the past, he stated, then offered a slight shrug. They remain with me. Several students chuckled, not directed at him this time, but because the atmosphere was easing. Lamar didn't pause for a reply. He departed, mop in hand, his shoes squeaking quietly down the hallway, as if nothing had occurred. It was as if he hadn't just resolved a complex academic challenge in less than 3 minutes without using a calculator. That's when the phones appeared. Someone had recorded the entire incident. Carly Benson, a junior in the third row, had already begun editing the video before the school bell sounded. In the hallway between classes, the topic of conversation was solely focused on the event. Did you see Mr. Dorsey? Braddock's expression. He appeared as if someone had disconnected him. Where did he acquire that knowledge? It was believed he only cleaned floors. By lunchtime, the video appeared on TikTok and then Instagram. It was unedited, simply a shaky view of Lamar's hands working on the board, accompanied by a voice saying, "Yo, he's solving it." The text accompanying the video stated, "Our janitor just outperformed the calculus teacher." Some people found it amusing. Others observed it with disbelief. Nevertheless, the excitement continued to build. In the teacher's lounge, the atmosphere was similarly charged. "Are you suggesting he completed a full derivative chain problem mentally?" inquired Ms. Lin, the physics teacher. She had paused, mid-bite of her sandwich, and so did he, muttered Mr. Crane, the English teacher. Didn't use notes. Didn't even pause. It was like muscle memory. Braddock was at the corner table, seemingly grading papers. He remained silent. However, Principal Everett spoke. He had been at the school for 6 years. It was surprising that no one knew he had an academic background. People shook their heads. Few people really knew much about Lamar. He arrived early. He left late. The floors were always clean. Light bulbs rarely failed within a day. The man worked in silence. However, he was no longer simply the man behind the mop. Down the hallway, a group of students waited near the janitor's closet. They weren't there to report a spill or request a broom. They simply wanted to speak with him. One student, a 12-year-old boy holding his geometry book, inquired, "Do you tutor Mr. Dorsey?" Lamar blinked. "I haven't in a long time," he replied. "You should," the boy suggested. That was a kind thing to say. Lamar chuckled, but it wasn't unkind. "I'm simply astonished." During the third period the following day, Braddock's demeanor had changed. He refrained from making jokes. He didn't call on students arbitrarily. He spoke with his gaze directed at the board, his voice more subdued than normal. It wasn't voiced directly, but it was obvious to all. Following the class, Wes approached him. "Mr. Braddock, regarding that incident with Mr. Dorsey yesterday, he employed the very method you demonstrated last week. The chain rule, correct?" Braddock nodded once. "That is correct. Only he articulated it more effectively." Braddock remained silent. However, the truly startling aspect wasn't the proposed solution itself. It was what Lamar said following it. Lamar Dorsey hadn't intended to create a disturbance. He generally avoided being the focus of attention. This had been the case since his youth. Consequently, when students began congregating near the maintenance closet simply to converse, or when teachers directed extended glances his way in the hallways, he felt uneasy. He lowered his gaze and continued with his regular activities. Restocking paper towels, repairing a leaky faucet in the boys' locker room, and cleaning cafeteria tables consumed his time. However, he began to notice a subtle change. There was a perceptible shift in how people regarded him, as if they were attempting to place him within a framework they hadn't previously recognized. This wasn't merely curiosity, it was a mixture of confusion, respect, and perhaps regret. The sensation made him uncomfortable. Later that afternoon, Principal Everett requested that he visit the front office. He entered, still wearing his gloves, his uniform slightly damp from cleaning the cafeteria sinks. He took off his cap as a gesture of respect. Everett leaned forward in his chair, his hands clasped together. "Lamar, may I ask you a question? Do you have experience in education or engineering?" Lamar paused. He glanced downwards briefly, as if revisiting a long-forgotten aspect of himself. "I attended Purdue," he said softly. "Mechanical engineering. Full scholarship." The principal leaned back, eyebrows raised. "You serious?" was Lamar's reply. He had plans. Things got complicated, and for the first time in a long while, he began to recount the story. He'd grown up in Gary, Indiana. A bright young man, he's always been fascinated by how things worked. Motors, pulleys, anything he could take apart and put back together. His mother, Estelle, raised him and his two sisters on her own. She worked overtime at a textile plant and still found time to read to them every night. She held a deep conviction that education offered the sole path to advancement, frequently stating, "Books first, always." She explained that the world might attempt to deny opportunity, but possessing your own key ensured access. Lamar secured that key. He was valedictorian, a winner at the state science fair, and then received a scholarship to Purdue. During his freshman year, he was already tutoring fellow students. Instructors noticed his name on the attendance roster and took note. However, sophomore year brought a life-altering phone call. His mother had collapsed at work. Medical professionals diagnosed her with advanced cancer. When Lamar arrived at the hospital, she was struggling to remain conscious. "I can handle this," she murmured. He disregarded her request and did not return home. He took a semester off from school, then another. He found employment, working in a warehouse and doing overnight shifts at a grocery store. He worked to cover expenses. Academic pursuits became less important. So did the dream. When his mother died, possessions were disorganized. He lacked a place to return to, lacked funds to complete his degree, and received no communication from a guidance counselor checking on his absence. "I repeatedly thought I would return to school," Lamar told Everett. But one situation led to another. Life doesn't wait for anyone. The principal remained silent. The narrative carried weight, not melodrama. It was simply authentic, the sort of existence one rarely encounters unless actively inquired about. At his residence, Lamar stored his academic records in a box situated beneath his bed. He possessed a faded Purdue sweatshirt, an antique calculator, and a photograph of himself and his mother from orientation day. He had not used any of these items, yet he kept them. Now they were being revisited. That evening, he was seated on the rear steps of his modest apartment complex. The sky was dusky, with a stillness punctuated only by the distant murmur of vehicles. He drank tea from a metal thermos and gazed into the distance. It had been years since he's considered calculus. It had been a while since his last tutoring job, before he left school, and now it reappeared, like a familiar face at his door. But a single choice threatened to undo all his efforts. While in college, Lamar had vowed to take a brief respite, stabilize his family situation, and then complete his education successfully. However, life rarely follows plans, particularly those founded on hope. Following his mother's passing, Lamar went back to Gary, attempting to rebuild. His sisters were still in high school, struggling to manage. Bills accumulated on the counter. The landlord demanded rent, and no one from Purdue contacted him to inquire about his disappearance. He accepted any available work. He worked as a stockroom loader, a janitor at a strip mall, and provided overnight security at a shipping yard. Anything that provided sufficient income to pay the electricity bill. His education receded further and further from his immediate concerns. Initially, he would occasionally contact the university to inquire about reapplying and transferring credits. Forms were sent to him. He completed them. However, he didn't mail them. There was always an obstacle. Then came a critical moment. It occurred in late November. A man named Frank Booker, the owner of a flooring company in South Bend, had offered Lamar consistent employment. "You're capable," he stated. "Don't squander your time sweeping floors. I'll personally train you." Lamar felt hopeful again, having a genuine opportunity. However, the day before his start date, his youngest sister, Alana, was involved in a school altercation. A disagreement that quickly worsened. She had injured someone's nose. Expulsion was threatened. Lamar felt compelled to be present. No one else would support her. Consequently, he missed his first day at the flooring job. Frank reassigned the position to another person. And that was the end of it. An opportunity was lost. He relinquished his pursuit of dreams and instead prioritized stability. Years passed indistinctly. He moved from town to town, holding various jobs. He maintained a clean record and avoided legal issues, simply focusing on survival. Quietly, when he reached Elkhart in his early 40s, he wasn't seeking a fresh start. He simply wanted a reliable income. The school district provided benefits. Summers were peaceful. He accepted the janitor position without hesitation. He found it agreeable in his own way. It was predictable. The work was clean. Students left him undisturbed. Teachers offered polite smiles. He didn't anticipate friendship or belonging. He didn't require it. He remained inconspicuous. He cleaned up messes and vanished before the last bell rang. Yet, numbers remained with him. Occasionally, after successfully completing a math course, he would briefly observe the board. He'd see a formula and mentally solve it. It felt akin to muscle memory, a facet of his mind that remained keen even as other aspects succumbed to the weight of habit. He would return home, prepare a simple supper, grilled fish, brown rice, perhaps some carrots, and peruse a vintage engineering book he stored behind the cereal boxes, just to confirm his abilities. He invariably did. He simply lacked an opportunity to demonstrate them. Then Mr. Braddock addressed him that day. And now, changes were occurring, not only at school, but also within him. He reflected on the students who waited outside his supply closet with questions. He thought about Wes Hanley visiting that morning with a folded piece of paper and saying, "Mr. Dorsey, I attempted to solve that same problem. Could you review it for me?" And Lamar had, with care, methodically. He clarified where Wes had made a mistake without causing embarrassment. Wes smiled when he finally grasped the concept. It wasn't solely a matter of pride. It was about a sense of belonging. That feeling lingered. However, not everyone reacted positively. Braddock, in particular, became unusually reserved. Students observed it. Teachers observed it. The experience of being surpassed by someone he hadn't previously considered a significant figure in front of his class clearly affected him. He didn't respond aggressively. Instead, his responses became more abrupt, his tolerance diminished. Any mention of Lamar in the lounge was swiftly redirected. He was not accustomed to being overshadowed, especially not by someone who had been unknown to him until now. But life held one more surprise, and this one brought him back to mathematics. The video didn't remain within Eisenberg High. It spread beyond. It began with a local student page reposting it, accompanied by the caption, "When your janitor turns out to be smarter than your teacher." Then it appeared on a regional education forum. By the weekend, it had spread across state lines. People online were astonished. They weren't mocking Lamar, they were impressed. He explained it with greater clarity than my college professor. Someone should give this man a classroom and a chalkboard, not a mop. It's a reminder that you never know someone's story. By Monday morning, Lamar had no idea any of this was occurring. He didn't use social media. He still had a flip phone. When he arrived at work, the first thing he did was repair a jammed paper towel dispenser in the girls' bathroom, just like he always did on Mondays. But something felt different. Conversations stopped as he passed. Students nodded, not out of duty, but with an unusual sense of respect. Some even smiled, as if meeting him for the first time. "Hey, Mr. Dorsey," a girl called out as he neared the library. "You're kind of famous now." Lamar chuckled quietly. However, when he rounded the corner, Wes Hamley was there, accompanied by two other students. One held a calculus book. A problem was indicated, marked in pink. "Would you mind going through this with us?" Wes asked. Lamar looked around, seemingly confused. "You got a free period?" Someone inquired. We made time. And so, in the hallway, surrounded by lockers and science fair posters, Lamar sat down on the floor with three teenagers and guided them through a multi-variable equation. Step by step, line by line. He didn't lecture them. He engaged with them. It wasn't boisterous or extravagant, but a significant moment unfolded. Further down the hallway, someone recorded the incident. Lamar wasn't informed. He likely would have disapproved. Returning to the office, Principal Everett was speaking with a member of the local school board. Affirming the information, she stated, "Lamar Dorsey. He's been with us for 6 years. No, he's not faculty. He's a custodian." She hesitated, then responded, "Well, I wouldn't describe it as unorthodox. I'd say it was overlooked." Simultaneously, in the teacher's lounge, Braddock was reviewing an email shared by a parent containing a link to the now viral video. He closed the laptop without watching it. That afternoon, Everett called Lamar back in, offered him a seat. Lamar stayed standing. "I've got a request from the board," the principal said. "They want to know if you'd be interested in running an after-school tutoring program. Small group, voluntary, just a trial run." Lamar didn't answer right away. "You'd be paid, of course," Everett added. "This isn't about changing your existing responsibilities, but rather expanding them." Reflecting on the skills he still possesses, Lamar glanced at his hands. They were calloused, clean, and worn. "I haven't taught in a long time," he stated. "You haven't ceased to know," Everett responded. Lamar raised his gaze. There was no strain evident in the man's tone, only a straightforward suggestion. "I will consider it," he said. That evening, he retrieved the aged cardboard box from beneath his bed. It contained the Purdue sweatshirt, the transcripts, and the orientation photo. He hadn't touched it in years. He spread everything out on the table. The paper had yellowed slightly. The edges were curled, but the words remained. That was the nature of knowledge. It didn't fade. It simply waited. He didn't need to become popular online. He didn't care about the views or the comments. But knowing he could still make a difference resonated with him. However, while some were impressed, others were not pleased by his growing recognition. As Lamar gained more recognition, the school environment started to change. This transformation initially manifested in the student body. Those who previously ignored him in the hallways began to greet him. Some even sought his assistance with homework during class breaks. Within 2 weeks, a small group of students had informally established what they termed Dorsey sessions. After school, they would gather in the library, notebooks ready, concentrating as Lamar elucidated ideas with a surprising clarity that everyone acknowledged. Soon, teachers noticed. Ms. Lin, the physics teacher, was the first to visit the library and observe him assisting the students. "You possess a talent," she remarked gently, "and it's not limited to calculations." However, not all reactions were positive. Mr. Braddock had remained silent regarding Lamar since the initial event. Within the teacher's lounge, he presented an outward appearance of normalcy. However, his silences betrayed a lingering bitterness. His speech was concise and abrupt. He avoided direct eye contact with Lamar and never referenced calculus. During a parent-teacher meeting, when Lamar's increasing impact on the students was discussed, Braddock stated, "It's good they're interested in math. Let's just make sure we don't blur the line between instruction and inspiration." While seemingly courteous, the underlying tone was unmistakable to everyone present. The principal didn't ignore the situation. He summoned Braddock to his office one morning and explained the issue directly. "I know it was difficult," Everett remarked, "but Lamar didn't shame you. He motivated them," Braddock conceded, adjusting in his chair. "He may lack formal credentials, but he's educated significantly more than we initially understood. And crucially, he's connecting with students in a manner that we haven't been able to." Braddock started to speak, then stopped. There was little to add. Lamar continued with his established schedule. He didn't request an official position. He didn't desire any preferential consideration. However, when Principal Harding suggested a small payment to continue the tutoring sessions, he agreed. The motivation wasn't financial, it simply felt appropriate. Consequently, he began carrying a small binder. Within it were pages of problems, blank worksheets, and notes he'd written by hand. During breaks, he'd sit in the back corner of the cafeteria and jot down formulas from memory, sometimes acknowledging a student who'd call out, "Hey, Mr. D." One afternoon, Carly, the student who filmed the original clip, approached him near the vending machines. "Did you ever want to be a teacher?" she asked. Lamar paused before replying. "I want to build things. Teach later, maybe, but life had different ideas." Carly responded, handing him a new mechanical pencil. "I think you're doing both now." He smiled. "Thank you." However, beneath this pleasantness, there was underlying tension. Some parents had begun contacting the school. While the response was largely positive, a single, anonymous concern reached the board. The question raised was whether it was appropriate for a janitor to tutor students within the school. Concerns were also voiced regarding his certification and background checks for instruction. Everett addressed the matter promptly. He is a district employee and has not acted inappropriately. It was suggested that if genuine concern was the driver, a direct conversation with me would have occurred. He did not inform Lamar about the complaint. Nevertheless, Lamar sensed a subtle tension present. Some individuals seemed unsure how to perceive him now that he no longer blended into the periphery. Then, one afternoon, Braddock took an unexpected action. He entered the library during one of Lamar's tutoring sessions. He observed silently from a distance as Lamar explained integrals to a group of 4 students. After roughly 10 minutes, he approached. "Do you mind if I sit in?" Braddock inquired. Lamar looked up. His expression remained unchanged. He gestured toward a chair. The students laughed, just enough to lighten the moment. Braddock smirked. For once, it wasn't mean. They sat together that day, saying little, but it was a start. Lamar Dorsey wasn't interested in titles. He had something else in mind. It wasn't about proving anything anymore. For Lamar Dorsey, standing at the whiteboard in the library with students gathered around, it was never about redemption or revenge. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He didn't seek recognition. He simply showed up for them, the kids, the ones who reminded him of the boy he once was. Every Tuesday and Thursday, right after the final bell, that corner of the library filled with chatter, questions, scribbled notes, and wide eyes as Lamar walked students through math problems they once feared. Not because he possessed all the answers, but because he helped them believe they could discover those answers themselves. That's what mattered. Isaiah, a freshman who previously struggled with algebra last semester, is now confidently solving quadratic equations. Tasha, who once disliked math, is now conducting brief study groups on weekends for her cousins, utilizing notes from Lamar. Lamar didn't lecture from the front of the room like a conventional teacher. Instead, he sat alongside his students, engaged in conversation, and posed questions before providing answers. Consequently, an increasing number of teachers began visiting. They weren't there to monitor, but simply to observe his methods. Ms. Lin inquired about utilizing some of his explanations in her class. Coach Rivera asked if Lamar would assist in establishing a summer preparation group for incoming freshmen. Even Braddock, typically hesitant and prideful, began visiting frequently. While not every day, he visited often enough. He would quietly suggest a couple of additional problems and eventually started offering words of encouragement to the students. The sharpness in his voice lessened. A change occurred within him, softening his demeanor. During one tutoring session, Braddock stayed behind after the students had departed. "You know," he remarked, glancing at the board, "I once believed this position conferred significance upon me. That teaching provided authority." Lamar remained silent. "But you're showing me what it truly involves, consistently being present and ensuring that each moment has value." Lamar simply nodded in agreement. Everyone occasionally strays from their path. He was not one to bear resentment. He had no need to. Principal Everett summoned him again a month later. A suggestion was put forward to establish his sessions as a non-credit elective class next semester, designed for enrichment and to build students' confidence. Everett cautioned that we would need to navigate some administrative processes. Lamar responded, shaking his head gently, and stated that he appreciated the offer but did not require the formal recognition. He preferred to maintain a simple approach, encouraging attendance based on genuine interest rather than a fixed schedule. Everett agreed, nodding, and assured him that they would provide support in any way possible. News of his efforts extended past the school district. A reporter from a local news outlet visited to conduct an interview. Lamar chose to keep his comments brief, avoiding sensationalism and self-promotion. "I'm simply demonstrating what they already possess," he stated. "Sometimes it requires a bit of time to recognize it." In the spring, Eisenberg High held its yearly student showcase, featuring science projects, art displays, and choir performances. In one corner of the gym, a booth called Dorsey's Table showcased student reflections on math, life, and confidence. Many students wrote about how Lamar had helped them discover more about themselves. This wasn't because he provided answers, but because he listened and showed belief. By the end of the night, people had stopped asking, "Is he the janitor?" Instead, they were saying, "That's Mr. Dorsey." He didn't wear a suit. He didn't give a speech. He stood near the table, smiled, and expressed gratitude to the students who approached. Afterwards that evening, returning to his apartment, he retrieved the well-worn Purdue sweatshirt from the box beneath his bed. He refrained from wearing it. Instead, he folded it carefully, placed it inside a fresh storage container, and added a file containing student thank you notes alongside it. He understood that legacy isn't defined by positions. It's about the impact you create in others. He didn't require completing school to instruct. He didn't need a degree to guide. He simply needed to be present each day and demonstrate genuine care. And that's precisely what he intended to continue. Thank you for hearing Lamar's story. If it resonated with you, if it brought to mind someone you may have underestimated or someone who offered you support, please subscribe and share it with someone who could benefit from it. Because sometimes the most brilliant intellects reside in the most unassuming environments. The CEO, known for his quiet demeanor, entered his own dealership incognito. What he overheard a salesman say to a struggling single mother abruptly halted him and initiated an unforeseen sequence of events. Derek Belton appeared unremarkable, certainly not the person who authorized salaries for 137 employees. He wasn't wearing a blazer, didn't carry a briefcase, and he arrived without a driver. That morning, he wore faded Levi's, well-worn sneakers, and a Tennessee Titans cap shading his face. He would be unrecognizable, even to the regional manager he had dined with 2 Fridays prior. He parked his black 2011 Honda Accord a short distance away. It wasn't a necessity. He possessed the means for a garage full of luxury vehicles. However, today was not about displays of wealth. He walked the additional block quietly, noticing the texture of the pavement with each footfall. As the dealership appeared, the signage, crisp and prominent, displaying Belton Auto Group across the glass, caused him to hesitate. His name. But what was happening beneath the surface? The concerns had initially surfaced as quiet remarks. A customer in Murfreesboro reported being sold an extended warranty she didn't comprehend. A family in Franklin alleged their monthly payment differed from the agreed-upon amount. These were minor issues. However, they caused Derek to question things. This location in Charlotte, Tennessee had consistently been a high-volume dealership. It specialized in mid-range vehicles and enjoyed strong sales. People trusted this dealership, or they once did. The showroom doors opened as he entered. The air held the scent of coffee and Armor All. A bell chimed above him, yet no one acknowledged it. Derek surveyed the area. There were 3 sales desks and 2 salesmen engaged in conversation by the corner water cooler. A woman managed the reception desk, absorbed in her phone. He appeared unremarkable, and that was his intention. He began his assessment in the service bay. It was quiet, the technicians working diligently, focused on their tasks. He observed nothing unusual. He proceeded through the customer waiting area, observing a man browse a magazine as his daughter entertained herself on a damaged iPad. He received no assistance. There was no greeting, not even a simple acknowledgement. He approached the line of Camrys situated near the glass wall. A couple stood close by, engaged in a conversation with a salesman whose speech was rapid and overly enthusiastic. The older man appeared displeased. The woman seemed bothered. "Sir," the salesman stated, "you won't locate a more advantageous offer anywhere. This item is covered by warranty and has seen minimal use. However, I can offer this price only if we finalize the agreement today." "That's the current situation," Derek mentioned. He recognized this as a tactic he hadn't been taught and made a note to himself. He then proceeded around a corner close to the used inventory office and paused. A young woman, likely in her late 20s, wearing a light jacket and carrying a baby in a carrier, was speaking with a man in a navy blazer. She appeared anxious, repeatedly looking down at a well-worn envelope she held. It likely contained pay stubs or a bank statement. The salesman presented himself with an assured, perhaps overly confident, demeanor, speaking with charm and certainty. "You're receiving full coverage for the first 3 years?" the salesman stated. "Bumper to bumper plus powertrain. If anything breaks, even air conditioning, it's covered." That was inaccurate. And the $895 fee I referenced, that's standard practice. We apply that to all our transactions. It covers a comprehensive pre-delivery inspection, interior cleaning, and anti-theft VIN etching. Derek paused. VIN etching? That practice had been removed from the dealership's process 3 years prior. And warranty coverage? No, that wasn't consistent with the terms. He had personally revised those contracts to ensure greater honesty and transparency. His pulse decelerated. He retreated a step back, out of their line of sight, heart pounding, but not from anger. It was disappointment. This was his business. This was his name. And this man was deceiving, with ease, a woman who appeared to have saved every cent to be present. Derek wasn't prepared to show himself. Not yet. He needed to observe the situation's extent. Derek moved discreetly behind a row of brochures close to the finance office, watching unseen. The woman nodded slowly in response to the salesman's words. Her fingers closed more firmly around the envelope. The baby in the carrier shifted and emitted a quiet whimper, but she seemed largely unaware. She was attempting to remain calm, likely assessing how closely the figures aligned with her budget. The salesman leaned in, lowering his voice. "You don't need to worry," he said. "People get nervous about credit checks, but I know how to navigate the process. I'll get you into a vehicle today, even if we have to be resourceful." She hesitated, her eyes flicking toward the exit. But the salesman kept his tone steady, reassuring. Too smooth, too confident, Derek clenched his jaw, then turned away. He didn't want her to feel observed. He walked towards the far end of the showroom, where a teenage boy was standing near a pre-owned SUV. A salesman passed him twice, without a greeting or any offer of assistance. He simply walked by. Derek moved next to the boy. "You're considering this one?" he asked. The teen looked over, seemingly a little taken aback. "Yeah, possibly. Mayan is outside. She asked me to check it out while she parks. Derek nodded. Do you know what kind of engine it has? The kid shrugged. Not really. She simply requires a secure environment. Her vehicle malfunctioned last week, another incident. Another customer was missed. It was hurtful, not due to the lost transaction, but because it confirmed everything for Derek. At some point, they had ceased to listen, stopped acknowledging individuals. And it wasn't just a single problematic employee. It was a prevailing attitude, a recurring behavior. He proceeded towards the reception desk. The woman still hadn't looked up. She tapped her screen, chewing her gum, scrolling. Derek positioned himself in front of her, simply to gauge the situation. 10 seconds elapsed. Then 20. At last, she raised her head and blinked. Oh, do you have an appointment? No, Derek replied calmly. Just browsing. She responded with a languid smile, gesturing vaguely towards the floor. They'll get to you. They did not. For the subsequent 30 minutes, Derek moved between various departments. The only assistance he received came from a young lot attendant named Trevor, who appeared to be no older than 19. He noticed Derek close to the service entrance and offered, Sir, do you need anything? We have water inside. I can get you a brochure if you're interested in the new hybrids. Derek smiled and replied, I'm good. Thank you. He then asked, What's your name? Trevor responded, Trevor. Do you like it here, Trevor? Trevor paused. It's all right. People can be rude. Not just customers, but sometimes managers too. I prefer to keep to myself. Do they treat customers fairly? Trevor looked down. Most of the time. There was no bitterness in his tone. Derek placed a reassuring hand on the kid's shoulder. Be careful who teaches you what, he advised. Trevor looked at him, then nodded. Before Derek could say anything further, a familiar laugh came from the glass hallway. Brent Collar, the salesman, was now leading the young mother toward a side office. Her name tag said Brent Collar. She appeared overwhelmed, holding her papers tightly. Derek kept a discreet distance as he watched. Brent paused before the office door, retrieved paperwork from a file, and announced, Here's the first quote. It's going to appear high initially, but please don't worry. I'll adjust it once I input your information into the system. This is our standard procedure. Derek moved nearer, feigning interest in a flyer on the wall. From his position, he observed the quote. The figures were inflated. Listed were charges for warranty, dealership fees, VIN etching, and a maintenance guarantee, all non-standard and unapproved. This was everything Derek had worked to eliminate years prior. Brent, however, did not appear to be a person apprehensive about disregarding regulations. He presented as someone who believed no one was observing. Brent indicated for the woman to take a seat. She settled into the chair, moving her baby's carrier to the floor nearby. The little girl made a soft whimpering sound and kicked gently, yet Brent did not even look down. His gaze remained focused on the documents he held, turning pages, emphasizing sections, and drawing circles. Each action appeared rehearsed, refined, and routine. We're going to structure this to ensure your monthly payment stays under $350, he stated. The woman offered a slow, cautious nod. What's your name again? He inquired, barely looking up. Monique, she replied. Monique Ellis. Derek stood just outside the office, back against the wall, feigning interest in the certified pre-owned display. He overheard every word. Brent smiled. All right, Monique. You're going to love this. You're approved for a 2019 Corolla. Excellent condition, low mileage. That's a significant advantage. We remain committed to your protection. Therefore, we're providing a 3-year full coverage plan. This includes everything from the engine to the electronics. Roadside assistance is also included should you lock your keys in the car. That level of peace of mind? Priceless. Derek's hand slowly curled into a fist by his side. However, there was no such plan, not like Brent described it. And the quote, the one he'd caught a glimpse of earlier, had extra charges tucked in every margin. Some of them were outright fiction. Monique adjusted in her chair. So, is all of that included in the price? Brent offered a warm, reassuring smile. It's all part of your protection package. We simply itemize it separately on the form. This simplifies things for the finance office. He continued, speaking rapidly and with excessive confidence, gesturing with a pen as if performing a magic trick. He even produced a calculator to minimize the appearance of the payment amount. For example, without the package, your monthly cost would be $384. With the included safeguard, the price reduces to $349. More manageable, isn't it? Derek scrutinized the figures. That calculation appeared illogical. It seemed like a deceptive tactic. He couldn't fathom how Brent maintained his composure. But it was evident this wasn't his first presentation. Then Monique posed a question that silenced the room. Do you believe I could return tomorrow? She inquired softly. I simply want to ensure I fully grasp everything first. Brent's demeanor subtly altered, a nearly imperceptible change. His jaw tightened briefly. However, he quickly regained his composure, adopting a more affable tone. I completely understand, he said smoothly. But the situation is that this car has two other potential buyers. One of them test drove it earlier today. I can't guarantee it will still be available tomorrow. You wouldn't want to miss out because of a minor consideration, would you? Monique blinked. Her fingers shifted around her envelope. Brent quietly lowered his voice, leaning closer. Listen, I've witnessed individuals leave, intending to consider it further overnight. Then the car was gone, and they were facing a situation that was more difficult and costly. You deserve something better, and this is it. He pushed the documents across to her. That was the end of it. Derek entered the office, maintaining a calm but resolute tone. That doesn't sound like the protection plan we provide, Brent said, blinking. Monique turned to Derek, appearing surprised. Brent quickly regained his composure. Pardon me? Derek repeated, the plan you're describing doesn't exist, not in that form. Brent lifted an eyebrow, assessing Derek. Do you work here? Something like that. Brent chuckled dryly. Look, I don't know who you are, but I've been here for 4 years. I know the packages inside and out. Derek pointed to the quote. Show me where it says full electronics coverage. Show me where VAR and etching is required. Show me the breakdown. Brent hesitated. It's in the system. Finance will explain it better. No, Derek said flatly. You explain it right now. Monique rose slowly in front of her, holding her baby close. Brent's face flushed. I don't have to deal with this. You're not even. But he stopped speaking. The general manager had just appeared behind Derek, his eyes wide. Mr. Belton, the manager said. Brent's mouth dropped open. Derek didn't smile, didn't say a word. He turned toward Monique. I'm sorry, he said softly. This isn't how we treat people. Not here, not under my name. But this wasn't over, not yet. The repercussions extended beyond a single falsehood. The room seemed to contract the instant the name, Mebleton, was spoken. Brent's complexion turned ashen. His assured demeanor disappeared, as if it were vapor on a chilled surface. Monique looked back and forth between the two men, bewildered, still cradling her baby, uncertain of the situation she's entered. Derek subtly turned to the general manager, standing in the doorway. He requested a conference room, speaking softly. Jeff Lorman, the manager, a man with a flushed face, nodded and indicated a hallway located at the rear of the showroom. Derek turned to Monique and spoke in a quiet, reassuring voice. Please come with me. I want to correct this. She paused briefly, then followed. Her movements were deliberate but hesitant. The baby began to stir again, perhaps reacting to the palpable tension. As they passed the workstations, the entire level appeared to become silent. Telephones ceased their ringing, and conversations were interrupted. Several employees glanced over their workstations and angled towards one another, speaking quietly. Trevor, the lot attendant from earlier, positioned himself close to the entrance and offered Derek a knowing look, but remained silent. Within the compact, glass-enclosed conference room, Derek drew out a chair for Monique and settled opposite her. Jeff entered behind them, appearing noticeably uneasy. Brent followed, attempting to seem unconcerned, but without success. He folded his arms and rested against the distant wall. Derek took the folder Brent had put on the table. Is this the quote you gave her? He asked, not looking up. Brent moved slightly. Yes. Derek opened the folder, laid out the pages, and circled several numbers with a pen from the table's holder. Explain these, he said. Brent sat up straighter. Look, I don't know why I'm being questioned. Explain them, Brent paused. He looked at Jeff, hoping for support, but Jeff avoided his gaze. I mean, those are standard charges. Everyone includes them. Do you have documentation showing these fees were authorized? Derek inquired. They should be in the system. No, they aren't, Derek replied, his voice gaining strength. I was involved in revising the system. That VIN etching fee? It was discontinued in 2021. Powertrain coverage? It's limited to 5 years, not the comprehensive coverage you advertised. You added more than $2,000 in fabricated fees to a customer who came here simply trying to purchase a secure vehicle for her baby. Monique's hands trembled a little as she listened, but she did not speak. Her gaze remained on the document. You stated the payment would be $349, Dara proceeded. That is achievable only if she provides a down payment you failed to disclose. Furthermore, the interest rate you presented to her is inflated by a minimum of 2.5%. You are not just misleading Brent, you are being dishonest. Brent moved away from the wall and straightened. I have consistently met my quarterly goals. Customers leave satisfied. I understand sales, all right? Derek moved closer. You know how to apply undue influence. A distinction exists. Jeff finally spoke. Derek, I didn't know he was doing all that, I swear. We've been busy and the numbers have been good. That's exactly the problem, Derek interjected. You cared about the numbers, I cared about the people. Monique rose then, slowly, her face flushed with embarrassment and anger. I thought this was a good place, she said quietly. I really thought this was different. Derek turned to her. It was supposed to be. And I'm sorry it wasn't. He reached into his back pocket, retrieved his wallet, and produced a card. This is my direct line. I will personally ensure you receive a fair deal. If you desire the car, you'll obtain it at the correct price, free of unnecessary complications. She accepted the card deliberately. Thank you, she said. We'll have someone else manage the paperwork, Derek added. Someone who doesn't fabricate figures. Brent's arms fell to his sides. Clean out your desk, Derek stated, rising. You are terminated here. There was no room for discussion. You were aware of that, yet disregarded it. Brent didn't object further. He left abruptly, speaking quietly to himself. No one pursued him. Derek addressed Jeff. We aren't finished talking either. He stated, I'll see you in your office in 10. Subsequently, he held the door for Monique and guided her back towards the lobby. People glanced around. Conversations began anew, subdued and apprehensive. Derek remained silent until they arrived at the reception desk. He regarded the woman seated there. Did you greet her upon her arrival? The receptionist hesitated, then swallowed. I don't recall. Derek slowly shook his head. Begin to recall, or begin searching. However, dismissing a single employee wouldn't resolve the underlying issues. Derek recognized that a cultural shift was necessary, or the company would decline from within. Derek was seated alone in Jeff Lorman's office, gazing out at the dealership floor through the blinds. A heavy silence filled the room. From behind the closed door, the usual showroom sounds had resumed. The usual sounds filled the office, casual chatter, the click of footsteps on tile, and ringing phones. However, a new feeling now permeated the atmosphere, a sense of unease. He glanced up as Jeff entered, his movements uncertain. The man appeared diminished, as if suddenly aware of his oversight. Jeff took a seat without prompting. I was unaware, he said softly. I truly swear to you, Derek, I wasn't aware Brent was engaging in that activity. But you were aware of something, Derek responded. You knew complaints were increasing. You were aware that deals were becoming more competitive. You were also aware that customer satisfaction scores decreased last quarter, and you attributed it to the surveys used. Jeff remained silent. Derek moved forward, resting his elbows on the desk. What happened to what we created here? He asked. I thought we were performing well, Jeff stated. The numbers were strong. Staff turnover was minimal. I assumed perhaps the industry simply shifted slightly. The industry didn't shift, Derek responded, maintaining a calm tone. We did. We lost sight of why people initially came here. We ceased prioritizing customer relationships and began focusing on achieving sales targets. Jeff sighed, massaging his face. So what's the plan? We need a thorough overhaul, Derek stated. and that extends beyond dismissing Brent. I require a review of every transaction from the past 90 days. Reimburse any clients where the terms weren't transparently conveyed. Furthermore, I want individual meetings with each salesperson. I need to understand their training processes, the priorities they receive, and to identify anyone else who believes it's acceptable to deceive customers with a friendly demeanor. Jeff acknowledged slowly. And one more thing, Derek added, I want Trevor in my office next week. Jeff blinked. The lot kid? Derek replied, yeah, he's one of the only ones who looked a customer in the eye today. That matters. A knock at the door interrupted them. The receptionist appeared, visibly nervous. Mr. Belton, the customer, Monique Ellis, is still in the lounge, she said. She said she's waiting for her ride. Derek stood. Please get her a bottle of water and offer her a seat in the private lounge, away from the plastic chairs near the vending machine. Make sure she feels valued. The receptionist acknowledged promptly and went to attend to the request. Derek returned to the showroom. Several employees glanced up, but there was no conversation. Some consciously avoided eye contact. Monique was situated in the far corner, her baby now asleep in the carrier beside her. She appeared weary, not only physically, but also emotionally drained. He approached her gently. This is a lot, he admitted. More than you anticipated, she replied with a gentle smile. I've faced tougher situations, he stated. I understand that, but you shouldn't have had to experience this, she said, shrugging. People deceive me frequently. It happens at work, in shops, and even at the clinic. I'm accustomed to it. That comment resonated more deeply than he anticipated. You shouldn't be exposed to that. Certainly not here. That's my responsibility. She then focused on him, truly observing him. Why did you come in today? Why are you dressed like that? Derek offered a soft smile. She stifled a quiet chuckle, noting people rarely shared the full truth with the man in the suit. He then presented her with a small folder. If you're still interested in that car, these are the accurate figures. There are no hidden details. I had our finance manager verify them directly. Furthermore, we've included a year of service maintenance at no cost. Her eyebrows rose in surprise. Why? He replied, because someone needs to remind this place of its values. Shortly after, a silver hatchback, distinguished by a missing hubcap, arrived to take her away. Her sister signaled from the driver's seat. Monique rose, corrected the carrier, and glanced back at Derek. Don't let them ruin what you built, she said. I won't, he replied. She exited without a backward look. But restoring Monique's confidence was not the only task. It involved rebuilding the confidence of every person who had ever entered those doors. Derek returned 3 days later. This time, there was no disguise, no cap, no jeans. He was dressed in a tailored navy suit and entered through the front doors as if he belonged. And in truth, he did. This wasn't intended as a display of dominance. It was a matter of responsibility. The entire staff had received notification that morning. Scheduled meetings were canceled, and phone lines were redirected to voicemail. The dealership remained open, but no sales transactions would occur prior to 11 a.m. Derek had arranged a company-wide meeting, and every employee attended, including those on part-time shifts. The group assembled in the break room, squeezed together amongst vending machines and aged chairs. Several were leaning against the walls. Trevor stood toward the rear, his arms crossed, but attentive. Jeff was seated near the front, a notebook open but unused. Derek addressed them, speaking plainly without a microphone or podium. I established this company in 2004, he began, not through investors or a franchise agreement, but with a used car lot situated behind a barbecue joint in Murfreesboro. During the first week, I sold 3 cars, personally washing each one. Some individuals quietly expressed amusement. At that time, I wasn't sure if I would succeed, but I possessed 2 valuable assets: my reputation and my commitment to honesty. I consistently ensured I could fulfill any promise made and avoided dishonesty when closing deals. The atmosphere in the room was now quiet. However, a significant shift has occurred, he continued. This isn't limited to a single salesperson. It's about how we compromise on minor details and prioritize speed over customer care. We've begun to see individuals as sales goals rather than human beings. That's not what I built. That's not who we are. He looked around the room. If you've ever included an additional charge because you believed you could, if you've ever hurried a woman out the door because she didn't appear to be able to afford our services, if you've ever spoken condescendingly to someone simply because you were able, today marks a turning point. A few people visibly expressed discomfort. You have a choice, he said. The situation demanded a resolution, either assistance or a new employment opportunity. Silence followed, then a voice spoke up. It was Trevor, Mr. Belton, and Derek turned to him. Yeah, Trevor said, appearing nervous, but proceeding anyway. What if some of us were performing well, but no one acknowledged it? Derek smiled. Then we need to start noticing. Starting today, he walked over and handed Trevor a small envelope. Inside was a letter of promotion, from lot attendant to junior sales associate, including full training and benefits. Trevor blinked. Are you serious? Derek stated, because the people who treat others with respect are the ones I want representing my name. Following the meeting, changes occurred rapidly. Brent's deals were reviewed. 5 of them necessitated full or partial refunds. Monique's case served as the focus of a training seminar. Every single manager was obligated to participate in a 3-week ethics and customer care workshop. Derek even re-engaged a retired employee. Arlene Cupp, a direct woman in her 60s who previously managed the front desk, had departed 2 years prior, citing a change in the atmosphere. She was now the new head of customer relations. Arlene's initial action involved installing a glass wall separating the sales desk and the finance office, ensuring transparency in all communications. Derek walked through the lot that Friday, observing the staff's interactions. A subtle shift permeated the atmosphere, not flawless, but calmer, more deliberate, stemming from understanding rather than apprehension. He observed a young salesperson patiently explaining trim-level differences to an older gentleman, ensuring he was heard. This detail, absent from any spreadsheet, held greater significance than any monthly performance goal. Arlene approached. It appears they recall their employer, she remarked, and rightfully so. Derek responded, stating he wasn't leaving, although one element remained. The core reason for this endeavor needed to be revisited. That Sunday morning, Derek was seated on the porch of his mother's former residence in Jackson, Tennessee. The sun had just begun to rise, and the air retained the stillness of the early hours. He took his coffee slowly, looking out at the yard he previously mowed every Saturday during his teenage years. Years had passed since her passing, yet the atmosphere of the place remained unchanged. Now, it belonged to him, recollection solidified in brick and wood. He retrieved a photograph from his jacket pocket, the image faded with curled edges. The picture showed him, no older than 10, standing next to his mother before a dull, rust-colored Oldsmobile. Her smile was broad and proud, not due to the car's newness as it wasn't, but because it was hers. That marked the day she purchased her first vehicle independently. He recalled how she, a nurse, managed without a cosigner or assistance, relying solely on her paycheck and a salesman who painstakingly explained each document before she signed. Derek remembered her meticulously verifying every detail. He remembered her asking questions, even when her voice wavered, and how the man behind the desk never made her feel inadequate for doing so. He remembered that. And now, decades later, he occupied the man's position behind the desk. He was the man whose name appeared above the showroom. He was the person who influenced every customer's experience upon entering. He looked at the picture once more. That instance profoundly impacted him, teaching him that dignity wasn't something acquired through wealth. It was something inherent, deserved simply by being present and making an effort. The world hadn't been kind to his mother, but on that day, she received recognition, and he carried that with him. Returning to the dealership the following week, Derek requested a new plaque be installed by the entrance. The message stated that we treat each customer as if they were purchasing their first car, demonstrating dignity, patience, and honesty. It wasn't intended for widespread attention or media coverage. The goal was for every employee to read it daily. Trevor read it every morning, first thing. Monique returned a month later to have her car serviced. She entered wearing a hoodie, holding her daughter, and smiled upon seeing Trevor at the desk. "You remember me?" she asked. He smiled in return. "Of course I do. We had her in that silver Corolla, correct?" She affirmed. "She's performing well." They continued their conversation briefly, covering minor details, and the interaction felt comfortable, because now it felt natural. Derek observed from his office, unnoticed, simply watching. He didn't require attention. He desired none. The focus wasn't on him. The purpose was this: you don't establish a successful business solely on profit. You build it on trust, on the manner in which you treat people when you believe no one is observing. He learned that from his mom. He communicated this to others via Brent. And now, with each handshake, each sale, each explanation provided without pressure or misleading information, he was restoring it. Incrementally, deliberately, that's what integrity truly represents. Not something asserted, something safeguarded. For once lost, regaining it demands all your resources. And Derek Belton refused to allow his reputation to signify anything other than honesty. If this story resonated with you personally, if it brought to mind a time you felt disregarded, or a time someone championed you when they weren't obligated to, please subscribe. We have more stories coming that speak to the heart, not just the headline.